I've already played all of the WCW games that I'm aware of. There have been 13 in total. These games were on the NES, SNES, PS1, N64, and Game Boy. Some of these have been among the worst games that I have ever played, while others have been just very good. A few have been average, but I would say probably half of them have been average to good. And then 5 of them have been just absolutely terrible. It was interesting to just watch how the games really matched the way WCW was going. They started off really well, and then just totally fell apart in the 2000s. Really, in like the late 90s, all the way up to 2001, the games just got considerably worse. They had a brief moment with Mayhem that was average, but the others were just terrible. Anyway, let's get into the list. The N64 port of WCW Nitro is one of the worst games that I have ever played. This is a combination of Nitro and Thunder from the PS1, and the result of putting these two games together is something that is damn near unplayable. The best part of this game is the roster. After that, everything falls apart. The controls are terrible, the graphics are worse, everything is just hamstrung by some really unresponsive controls. It's absolutely terrible. Nothing is worse than this game. Everything on this list is at least playable. I would love to know more about Inland Productions and how they made these games, especially this one, because they took two games that are bad, but you could at least play them, and I could see someone finding some enjoyment out of them, and they turned it into this, which is just absolutely awful. It is possible to play it, but I have no frickin' idea why you would want to suffer through it. The N64 version of Backstage Assault is a little worse than the PS1 game. Neither are good at all, or even come close to being average. This one is a little worse, though, because of the graphics. The controls are not as good either. It's just a really bad game. The thing that I really didn't like is they had to cut out all of the TV footage from it. That made the PS1 game at least a little cool, because then you had like these little cutscenes from real life footage, and that was kind of interesting. Unfortunately, that's gone here, so all you have is just a bad game that should have been a match in a bigger game. It's really terrible. I actually had fun with the PS1 version of Backstage Assault for about 20 minutes, and then it got really boring because you're doing the exact same thing. There's just nothing else to it. It's fighting in backstage rooms. You can't do any other match than a hardcore match. The destructible environment is kind of interesting, but by and large, this is just a bad game. I thought the controls were a little bit better than the N64 version. The graphics were a little bit better, and it also had the TV footage that wasn't in the N64 version. After that, it's just a bad idea that should never have been made into a video game on its own. It's easy to play, but after you've played it for a few minutes, there's just nothing there. It gets really boring, really repetitive, even more so than any other wrestling game out there. This is a game that you would like dare your friends to play. For WCW/NWO Thunder, Inland Productions made the bold step of making everything considerably worse from WCW Nitro because this game is supposed to be the sequel. The only good thing in this is the graphics. After that, everything falls apart. Since this game is on the PS1, you do get some nice video from the TV show, and the intros are pretty good. The in-game graphics look pretty decent. After that, the game just gets terrible. The controls are terrible, there's no lockup system, and the game just feels like an awful version of an arcade game. Normally, I like arcade gameplay. It's easy to play, somewhat hard to master, but it's still pretty fun. Instead of doing that, Inland Productions decided to just make it annoying, a pain in the ass to learn, and just completely unsatisfying to master. The PS1 version of WCW Nitro is at least playable, but I'm not really sure why anybody would want to go back to play it, aside from making a list like this, or going through all the PS1 wrestling games. Much like WCW NWO Thunder, the only good thing about this game is the graphics. After that, everything is just going to fall apart for it. There was one thing that I really liked about this game, and that was the intros and the promos on the selection screen, and the FMV from the TV show that was used. That was really nice. The controls and the gameplay are just awful. I'm not sure why the developers removed a grapple system from the game, but they did, and it just kind of made everything suck. All of your attacks seem really delayed. The computer is just way better at this than you could ever hope to be, and it just seemed like I couldn't do anything that I really wanted to. It took me a very long time to just have any understanding of what was going on. Now we jump over to the Game Boy with WCW The Main Event. This one wasn't too bad. It was what I was expecting from a Game Boy game from the 1990s. And yeah, it's not that bad of a video game. It's got a kind of a cool story because Ric Flair wasn't added into this game, and the Steiner brothers hadn't been removed even though they weren't with the company anymore. The controls and the graphics are acceptable for the time. I really wasn't expecting too much from a Game Boy game, and I think, WCW The Main Event delivered on what it was supposed to be doing. Everything about this game is just okay. It's not special and it's not terrible. It's just an okay game. WCW Super Brawl on the Super Nintendo, it's not that bad. It's got a lot of problems, but I still enjoyed it a lot more than, the other games that have come before it on this list. The biggest issue with it are the controls. The graphics are decent when you get into the ring, but the digitized photos of the wrestlers and the short animations that they do on the character select screen, they're just not very good looking. The sound is actually one of the better parts of this game. To hear the wrestlers very clearly through the Super Nintendo, that was kind of cool to see. I really couldn't find a reason to put the Game Boy game ahead of this one. Like many of the other games in the bottom half of this list, I most likely won't come back to this game, but at least it's pretty decent. There are other Super Nintendo games that I like more than this one, but it's really not too bad once you get into it. There is a lot of good stuff here, but overall, not something I would come back to. WCW Wrestling on the NES is one of the better wrestling games for that system. The customization options are really interesting. I like the fact that you can pick which moves you want your wrestler to do, and you sort of set up the different control pattern that you want for it. That's pretty fun. It's a fun little game. It was nice to play something other than, the LJN or the Acclaim wrestling games. The controls took some time to get used to. The graphics were honestly pretty funny at times because the wrestlers are just changed. They're graphically changed from a different wrestling game, which was something that WCW did quite a bit. So they don't always look the way they should. It's kind of funny at times. There's also a lot of other weirdness with this that is pretty cool. I actually like this game quite a bit, especially when you compare it to some of the other wrestling games on the Nintendo, but it isn't better than what's on the rest of this list. There isn't too much separating the N64 version of WCW Mayhem from the PS1 version. I'm putting the N64 version a little bit lower just because it doesn't have all the full motion video that the PS1 version has. That's really about it. I think Mayhem is an average wrestling game. It's better than Nitro, Thunder, and Backstage Assault, but it's not as good as WCW vs. the World, World Tour, or Revenge. This one is perfectly fine for what it is. It's not the port of the game that I would like to play. I would rather be playing the PS1 version, and that's pretty much why the N64 version is here. Much like the N64 version, the PS1 version of WCW Mayhem really isn't anything special. This is the version of the game that I owned as a kid, so I've got a bit of a nostalgia for it. and like I mentioned with the previous one, I happen to like this game more than what some people do. This was a big improvement over Nitro and Thunder. I know that really isn't saying too much, but this game has better graphics, better controls, the gameplay is much better. The game just wasn't as good as the others that were released at this time. That's kind of what held it back, and then the developer didn't really do anything with this. They went with Backstage Assault, and it really wasn't all that great. This is one of the better wrestling games from the late 90s from WCW. It just unfortunately wasn't as good as it could have been. It was a great step in the right direction after Nitro and Thunder were just horrible. But yeah, there's just nothing special here. It's a perfectly average video game. WCW vs. the World is a fantastic game, and I wish I had known about it back in the 90s. This is a reskin or a port of a Japanese game, which was pretty common for the WCW games at the time. The gameplay is terrific. The spirit meter was a little confusing at first, but I figured it out after I looked it up in the manual and kind of understood what they expected me to know. I still wouldn't say I liked it, but at least it made a lot of sense. The graphics are probably the biggest issue with this game, and that's not really the game's fault. It's just the time that it was made. This is what video games looked like, or at least the better video games looked like. This game was a lot of fun to play back when I did my review of it. I like this one a little bit better than, say, Power Move Pro Wrestling, but both of them are still very good games. I love that there are a bunch of wrestling promotions that I would have never heard of any other way, because I really wasn't on the internet in the mid-90s, but yeah, this was still a great game. WCW vs. the NWO World Tour is an awesome game. This is one that I wish I had known about back in the 90s, but never played it. I didn't own an N64 at the time, so I completely missed out on it. And I was so glad to come back and play it when I went through all the N64 wrestling games. I think this one is the second best of all the WCW games. It's better than World Tour, but not by too much. I think its controls are better, the graphics are a little bit better than World Tour, and also I really love the roster. Really, the only knock against this game would be the graphics, and I don't think that they're any better or any worse than Versus the World. They're not as good as Mayhem, but the gameplay overall makes up for that. I think this is the second best WCW wrestling game, and if you didn't have a copy of Revenge, then this one would have been a perfectly acceptable alternative to that one. WCW/NWO Revenge is the sequel to World Tour, and it improves on everything that World Tour did. While the graphics are mostly the same, the gameplay got a little better and the roster got updated. There's also a lot more to do in this game than there was in World Tour. This is a spectacular game, the controls are great, the roster is really good, and it's an easy-to-learn game. I didn't have any problems with figuring out just what the game wanted me to do or how to do the moves. It was a really fun experience. Out of all the games on this list, this one ended up being my favorite, just because of how easy it was to play and how much fun it was. That's really the big thing with these. If I had fun with them, they ended up higher on this list. That's why Mayhem is where it is, and that's why this one is at the top of the list. It also happens to be the best out of all of these. If you are looking for a WCW game to play, then just go to Revenge and skip everything else on here. So I've been going back and looking at the review scores for the retro games that I talk about. I didn't do it for a bunch of these, because I just didn't have the idea to do this at the time, so I went back and looked at a bunch of them, especially the ones that I missed, and a few of them to get a refresher on. And yeah, I wish I had done this from the very beginning, because I think I found the one person that really liked WCW Backstage Assault. So there's a publication called Game Zone, or at least there was, I think they're gone now. They gave both versions of WCW Backstage Assault a 9 out of 10. And I thought that it might have been a mistake. One of those reviews is just lost to the internet. The other one is still archived, and yeah, there it was. It was a 9 out of 10, so it wasn't a misprint on the website that I looked at. The reviewer called the game, without a doubt, one of the best wrestling games they've seen in a long time, which suggests that this person hadn't played a wrestling game in about 10 years at that point. This is just like a very short review, and it made me laugh quite a bit. I was just really amazed to find something that said, that said WCW Backstage Assault was good. It was just so weird to read that. A few of the games that I liked, they had pretty low review scores or average review scores, which didn't really surprise me. And there would also always be an outlier that dragged the score down. Like WCW vs. the World, there was one review from Next Generation that gave it a 2 out of 5, and the reviewer didn't really give many details on their score, so that was kind of helpful. It was a very short review that really should have been edited. The only thing that I can find in there that, had anything to do with the wrestling was that it moved at a snail's pace. Everything else was just kind of weird. They also said that the game needed a little flash, which I'm not sure what that means. So, yeah, it was kind of just it felt like a garbage review that they just did to put out there because they needed to fill up space. The last review that I wanted to go over was for WCW NWO Revenge, because I just find it so strange. So N64 Magazine, which was a UK publication, it had some bold takes. It took some big swings and made a whole bunch of nonsensical statements at times. But yeah, they really liked WWF Warzone more than WCW NWO Revenge. And there really isn't too much more to say about that. As someone who really likes Warzone, and is seemingly one of only a handful of people that enjoy that game, I find it really strange that anyone would say it was better than Revenge was, because Revenge is by far the superior game to that one. Maybe they just leaned more into graphics, but yeah, it was very weird. The ending of that review just said, go and buy WWF Warzone instead. Do you hear me? So just, I really don't get what game that guy played, but Revenge is by far the better game. There were other weird ones. I think the Mayhem reviews were pretty spot on. It's not any different. They gave those average scores. Overall, they really didn't change too much over the years. There were a few games that got mediocre scores, and they ended up being considerably better than the games that, were average. It's weird to go back and look at these, especially when you find stuff that's just batshit crazy, like those Backstage Assault reviews. Going through these games has been a lot of fun. Even going over the bad ones, it's been fun just to look at what people said about those. What I really enjoy was just playing some of these games that I missed out on when I was little, and then reading the reviews for these games. That's just been a lot of fun to go through, and just really funny at times. When I looked over the reviews for these games, I found some really bizarre opinions, especially the Backstage Assault ones. I'm sorry to keep bringing those up, but they were just mind-boggling, and they really confused the hell out of me. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.